Coffee is a big part of my day. Not only does it help me get through the morning, but I just really love the taste of good quality beans. Trade is a subscription service that brings great coffee from indie roasters all over the country right to your door. Tell Trade what you typically like, whether it's espresso or single origins or even decaf, even how you like to make your coffee, and they will recommend the right beans for you. Or you can just choose from over 450 different coffees. Then you select how often you'd like the coffee delivered to you. Shipping is always free, by the way. And if you need to skip a week or so, just do that. You can do it. No charge at all. Then pick back up when you're ready to get beans delivered to your door again. Go to unitedwedrink.com/trade to get started with Trade today and start getting some of the best coffees in the country delivered to your door. That's unitedwedrink.com/trade. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, coworkers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour? More like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the United We Drink podcast right here on unitedwedrink.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever fine podcasts are found. My name is Mike Yarevich, Tired Dad Supreme, and I am joined here once again by my friend, Kevin Abbott.
So happy to be here with you, Mike. Tired Dad Supreme, one of the worst things to order at Taco Bell.
It really is.
Don't do that. You don't want to know what it is.
It's one of those things that like it tells you how you're going to feel afterwards. And even if you're not a dad, you're going to be like, "Oh fuck, all of a sudden I feel like a tired dad." Now I know what it feels like. So back, new episode. Kevin, I realized probably about 3/4 of the way through our last episode that we never asked you what you were drinking on that episode. And I saw what you were pouring for yourself today, and I think are you drinking the same thing that you drank last week?
Yes.
By can. And I think just by the view of the can, is it something from Allagash?
No. It's Athletic.
Oh, it is Athletic. Okay, I thought it was the what's it called? North Sky, or I think that's what it's called from Allagash.
No, so I'm really was actually upset that you never asked me because this is like my new favorite beer. It is freaking amazing. It's called All Out. I believe it's actually sponsored by AEW, All Elite Wrestling, and it's extra dark. Tim Buds was actually in town this last week, and I got a chance. He came by the brewery, and I actually went down to see him play at Revelry down in Fort Lauderdale, and didn't get a chance to talk to him much, but I did see him twice. And I was telling him how much I love this beer. Tim, who makes this beer, works for Athletic, and this is one of the best non-alcoholic beers on the market. And I've had a lot of really good ones recently, but as far as like this porter beer, he calls it a stout. I think because of the body of it, it reminds me of a porter. But it's just so clean. It has none of that residual weird sweetness to it. I think maybe if it does, because that's a normal thing with non-alcoholic beers, maybe it's just the roast hides it so well. But the roast is so good, and it's so well balanced, and it's got a little bitterness to it. It's so clean and refreshing for a darker beer. I just love this freaking thing. It is so good. I cannot recommend it more highly, and I can't find it but like one place, and they don't even always have it. So Tim said he's going to send me some, which I hope he doesn't do that because that's just a waste of the U.S. mail. But I mean, this is really good. If you have a chance to get this, and you're like me trying to explore these NA beers, man, it doesn't get much better than this.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look for that. Is it actually a AEW beer, or were you making a gag?
No,
Because
it's called All Out, which is one of their
okay,
pay-per-views. Yeah.
but I know that like Dean Ambrose, not Dean, what am I talking about? John Moxley is like super big into athletics stuff.
Mm.
Like I don't like early on in AEW, I think after he won like the world title, he took a picture of him like just with like stocks of athletic behind him,
I didn't know
and
that.
was like, "Hey, do you guys want to endorse me?" But that's really awesome. I will have to look out for that. I'm drinking something I haven't had this beer, and if you were to tell me 10 years, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. And it's because my brother-in-law brought some over and left it at my house. I'm having a monk in a trunk.
Monk in the Trunk. Oh, that's a blast from the past.
This is a contract brand for a local person, and it's actually brewed at 26 degree down in Pompano, and it's funny because my brother-in-law loves it, and I am like, this is what I remember it being. It's caramely, it is malty, and it has that ever so slight tinge of Belgian yeast ester. It was like trying to be the Fat Tire here when Fat Tire wasn't here, and now Fat Tire isn't Fat Tire, but is, but isn't, and this is now still trying to be Fat Tire.
That was a very succinct way of describing Monk in the Trunk.
No one could explain it better than that.
No one could, and no one should. Quite honestly, that should just be the lasting
Don't
thing.
try.
That should be part of the marketing campaign if they're still marketing the beer. That was everywhere. That was one of the only craft beers, quote unquote, made in South Florida when it came out. It was actually being contract brewed in South Carolina, I believe,
Yeah.
for a long period of time. And when all the craft started coming down here, that was one of the beers we were competing with. It's also the beer that everybody thought I made because we are a barrel of
Yeah.
monks and that beer was called Monk in the Trunk. So there was multiple times where I had to explain to people very simply that they were not in fact supporting my brewery by buying that beer. They were supporting another brewery that really didn't exist in that brewing company. And listen, much love. We know the people who own that brand or started that brand. I don't know who's still involved in it today, for sure. It's still the same people. I don't know, but that's great. Support that brand, but stop telling me that you buy my beer because you don't. And I had one guy just tell me he didn't believe me. He was that I was wrong, and
I
I always
remember
love
you
those.
I remember you telling the story on this uh show about you were doing a tasting at a store, and the person's like, "Hey, I love your beer, Monk in a Trunk." And you're like, "Well, that's not my beer. These are my beers." And then he went and grabbed Monk in a Trunk from the shelf and like waved it over at you like, "Hey, I'm getting your beer." And you're like, "Still not my beer."
I'm yelling at him across the store. Yeah. So, but that's my fault. That's our fault for naming our brewery Barrel of Monks
No, it is
Brewing.
your fault. You
Yeah.
singularly, you absolve all your other business partners who actually started the brewery before you came on board, but it's all your fault.
Well, listen, we were going to be Barefoot Monk, which would have been much worse somehow. And there was tons of other names that were just terrible. I mean, honestly, if I can go back and not be Barrel of Monks, that would be pretty great. But hey, listen, you got to play the cards you got.
That is true. That is true. Um, so today's episode, Kevin wanted to talk about. I think this is a great topic that we kind of talk about in a way through most of our episodes, and that's tap rooms. Like we may have had a tap room episode before, but like everything, even 2 years ago is a completely different conversation than what we had then. Because tap rooms today are really a very different beast than 10-ish years ago when we were first getting into this industry, and they were at that time a very different thing from a lot of the older legacy breweries at the time. like the ones who had been around since like the early 2000s or even the 90s. So I think it would be a good conversation to talk about.
Great. You want me to just kind of start throwing some topics out there? You got anything on your
Yeah.
mind you want to start with? Well, I think that it is really interesting the way that the tap room has evolved because when Barrel of Monks was opening up, and I'm just because I know the soup to nuts of Barrel of Monks, right? I was there at Funky when things were going on, but I had nothing to do with the administrative side. So I was just making beer, right? I was just tending bar and making beer. And then we were involved in the brewery that is often not named, and neither one of us were a part really of the nuts and bolts. I don't believe of that operation and getting off the ground. So, but looking at Barrel of Monks, we got so much pushback from the city because they didn't understand what we meant. Like we were going to make beer and sell it at the same place. And I thought that was so odd because I'd been to so many tap rooms around the country up until that point, and there were so many in the state of Florida already. But then you have to look back, and you mentioned legacy breweries. I mean, when you go to the Yingling Brewery in Tampa, they don't have a bar you can just go to and hang out. You go and do a tour, and then they pour you some beer. It's the same thing at the Boston Brewing, the original brewery in Boston. And you go, oh yeah, for a long time, a tasting room was just that. It was a tasting room. It was like going to a winery and it wasn't a bar you go to. It was a place you go to take a tour and try some beers. And the first evolution for craft breweries these became bars. These are bars you go to that exclusively sell one brand of beer and maybe some wine or now RTDs and some other things. And if you're in Michigan, you can have an alcohol license, so you can make your own alcohol as well as far as like liquor. But we saw that evolution, and that was really happening nationally around the time we were getting into craft beer. It had been in multiple states before that, but it was just an interesting thing, and it seems like it's been forever, but it certainly hasn't. And the reliance on tap rooms for revenue for so many breweries has flipped so much to being a portion of what you do, and it adds value to the bottom line because distribution is king. To now, anyone wanting to get in this business now, I say forget distribution. It's all about your tap room.
Absolutely. I mean, I going back to your point about just what a tasting room was, that idea of tasting to becoming bars. I look back at my time at the first brewery when I was bartending, and I mean, I was a bit of a pompous dick at the time, but
At the time?
when yeah, for this particular story, I'm a fucking gem now. Now people would come in and they'd be like, okay, so how does this work? And I would just kind of tongue in cheek go, you pick a beer, I give it to you, you give me money. Like we work just like any other bar. And now I look back and like that is confusing to people who have never done it before, or maybe people who have been to wineries and it's just like, oh, you get a tasting and things like that. And you don't really order full drinks. So I feel a little bit bad for being just one of those people at that time. I mean, this podcast has been a way of me reconciling with my past craft beer self, who was a fucking dick. But
Past?
What?
Nothing. Go ahead.
It's just a different type of dick now. uh, more confident and more forgiving. But it's at this I even remember from that first brewery, like the tasting room, the tap room was important, but I think distro, once we really started ramping into distro, was really the thing we were most concerned about, was getting placements and keeping placements, and the tap room will keep itself afloat. Like that's all just like extra on top. And now I'm completely with you. I would not do an ounce of distribution if I had the power to. at a brewery if I was running it. It would all be kept in house, and because that's where the money really is, and trying to build uh, just pretty much uh, yeah, just a destination place for people to always come to. Or I would go with like maybe for all intents and purposes a brew pub model in the way of opening up multiple locations. But Florida's not very good for that model here, where other states it's much easier. Like in Pennsylvania, I think I've said this before. If you're a brewery, you can open up, I believe it's up to 25 different tap rooms. They don't need to have a brewing facility on them, and you can transfer beer from your main brewery to those other tap rooms with no additional taxing. It doesn't need to go through any distribution whatsoever. You just, you pay for your rent there and your employees and all that. But I just look at that as a great way of extra outlets for selling beer. Like, it's just satellite tap rooms.
Well, I want to go back to what you said about 10 years ago or whatever it was when you're working at the brewery and people didn't know what was going on. That hasn't changed. I field phone calls every week of people calling and saying, "What do I do?" Or, "Do you have like a bar I can come to?" And yeah, my knee-jerk reaction is, "Of course, dumb fuck. Yeah. Yes, every brewery, unless it's inlet brewing, every brewery you can go to their brewery." I don't know why I'm picking on them. No reason to do that. Absolutely no reason. But every brewery you can do that. I don't know why this is so confusing, but it certainly is. They hear the term tasting room, and we use tap room more often these days. But yeah, that model has certainly shifted. I think I said this before. I certainly have on the show, but when I was leaving the brewery that we aren't going to name, I guess, again, and coming over to Open Barrel of Monks, a lot of the groundwork had been laid. I mean, the brew house had been purchased, and when I came on as a brewer and eventually as a partner, but so there was like a business model that had been put together already, and I shit you not, like the guys were like, "Oh, we'll sell a little bit of beer in this tap room, but our business is going to be 750 milliliter bottles to distribution." Wrong and wrong. I mean, you could not be more wrong if your name was wrong and you're Wrongenstein. I mean, obviously the format, the distro thing, it took a long time to get off the ground. And it's one of the reasons why we start off with an oversized 20-barrel brew house in a 10,000 square foot facility, was because we were going to do all this distro. Now, listen, I need the space. I'm busting at the seams as it is, and I'm not even producing 3,000 barrels yet. But our tap room is tiny. I mean, the proportion of our tap room to the tap room at Copper Point, I mean, yours is 3 times the size. And there's a reason why you can do so much more volume through there. And I think that, the location's better and stuff, I think, in a lot of ways. But if we could do it again, and when I talk to people about it, it's because your margins are there, because you have no competition in your own tap room, and you've got to bring people in and give visibility. That's definitely an issue. But I think everyone got the stars in their eyes about their beer on the shelf at the grocery store, and it just wasn't as sexy as having people come into your bar and drink your beer. And at least in this climate, this age of this era of craft beer, and at least in Florida, tap rooms are king, man.
Yeah, I would wager to say that it pretty much is across the country for most breweries. Like, being breweries that are probably like, if you're 5,000 barrels and under, your tap room is king. There's probably ones that are bigger than that still tap room is king. But you need to pump out a decent amount of beer for distro to really be your selling point. And we all know that distro fucking sucks right now for practically everyone. I mean, there's probably like 7 breweries who probably saw double digit growth on their distro. It's probably more like 8, but it's, yeah, you even see these bigger guys going heavier on on specialty stuff, taproom stuff. Like uh, we're big time fanboys of New Belgium on this show, but like you don't see very often how much stuff they do in their tap rooms in North Carolina and Colorado. They do specialty stuff that's just for there, that's brewed on their small pilot systems and tested out there that could eventually become big beers. But like they do good stuff through those tap rooms, and they certainly help them. Go ahead.
So I want to stick a pin in the specialty aspect of that because that's a big part of what I want to talk about. But another thing that got me thinking about this for the episode this week was that someone recently came into the brewery and was telling us about a potential new development that might be going up in very near proximity to the brewery to Barrel of Monks, and they wanted to ask some questions about what our hours are, how we interact with the community. Basically, they were saying, listen, this potential development could bring a lot of people right here in the neighborhood that would be walking distance of your brewery.
This is housing development.
Yeah, the housing development. Yeah, because we live, for anyone who doesn't know, which is everybody, we live in an industrial area. There is literally no other business you can walk into and buy anything in walking distance of where we are. So if you're coming to Barrel of Monks, that's where you're coming for. You might drive by to there's like a judo studio like in our thing that if you're dropping your kid off. But other than that, there's no reason to come to Roger Circle. So we have some housing around us, but it's not really it's certainly not walkable. And it's just kind of awkward to get there. You got to go to a main road, turn back onto another side street. So we just don't have a lot of locals like that come to the area. And a new development within walking distance would be massive. I mean, that captive audience of people, I mean, my wife and I, places we can walk to are our favorite places because we want to be able to kind of move around and not have to get in the car, especially if we're drinking. I mean, when we lived in Boynton Beach for a while, we would walk to breakfast 2 days a week, Saturday and Sunday, every single week. We'd walk to the bars and the restaurants around the corner. No, we don't have to get in a car and drive afterwards. So what I'm getting at is these kind of things are huge. And you can be enticed into an area because, oh, look at all these new subdivisions going up. We're going to be the local bar. We're going to be the place everyone goes. But by the nature of what those things are, those projects may never happen. Those projects might take 15 years to build. You go back to our old days at Coffee District, and it's not a brewery, but it was a craft beer bar. There was a development that was going up, quote unquote, across the street that he was counting on to be major customers for his coffee in the morning and for his beer at night. That took like 7 years to actually go up. I don't know if it ever turned out there for him, but he was counting on revenue from a new revenue stream that was going to help to make or break his business, and it took forever to happen. Odd Breed Wild Ales, a brewery that I have ownership in. We have been waiting for the development of that community in Pompano Beach since day one, and nothing has happened. There's like one restaurant down there, and all those housing places that were supposed to be filled 5 years ago, some of them haven't even broken that ground yet. So, there's so many things that go into this that can be so complicated for a tap room, and you can go broke waiting for these things to happen.
Yeah, we have it's funny. We are in a commercial industrial area ourselves, like many breweries who opened around the same time as us. But there has been development in the area over the last number of years. Directly down the end of our street is an apartment complex that we've developed a relationship with them. We give when they have like new tenants come in, they give them like a welcome package that has a free beer card in it from us. And they hold like little quarterly gatherings at the brewery for people to come and socialize and meet their neighbors and all of that. It hasn't been world changing, but I know that we do have some people who really do enjoy us who live down there, and I am so in agreement with you on the walkable things. I've become this armchair urbanist over the last number of years, and living in Philly, I think, helped a lot of it. Is living in walking distance to things that you want to do it is so good for your mental health, is so good for your life. Like, just not having to get into a car, being able to determine I am going to go to this place, walk to this place, ride my bike to this place because it's in my neighborhood, I think is a fantastic thing. And that I wish that everyone had the abilities to do those things. But unfortunately, suburban sprawl has caused a lot of places to be unwalkable and have to jump into a car in order to get somewhere, even if it's relatively close to you. But I digress from that. The actual point. But yeah, I hearing that something like that could be happening should make you a little bit happy. Like, even if you're cautiously optimistic about
It's
the
it's
thing.
it's in the best case scenario 3 to 5 years down the road,
Yeah.
if it ever happens, right? So we're gonna hang around. We're just celebrating our ninth anniversary. So best case scenario, 1/3 of the life of our brewery, we have to wait again, right? So it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen anytime soon. But no, it's exciting when that happens. But I just know that when we are always doing our due diligence. We've looked at different spaces many times for a second location, potentially moving, not it's not going to happen, but we necessarily it's a very very low chance of happening, but we're always looking because you have to be on the lookout for a better situation that's going to put your business in a better position to succeed. And the hardest part is finding something, you know, we are always talking about with our local businesses, and we certainly do in the craft beer community, is that we want to be a part of the community. You always hear that. Every marketing company, you want to be a part of the community. We could be a theoretical part of the community, but it's hard to be an actual physical part of the community when you're nowhere near the community. you know,
This is true. Yeah.
so and it really is a different mentality of someone that has to drive to a place in an industrial park that is nowhere near any other similar business. And mentally, for a lot of people, it seems like a special thing. It seems like a once in a while thing. It seems like a thing you stop by to on the way to the thing you're actually going to do. And I find that is what craft breweries, even craft breweries with great food, I mean, I think Barrel of Monks offer some really good food. Cheffery Eats, great burgers, award-winning burgers, been featured on national television, diners, drive-ins, and dives. I mean, cult following for his burgers. If you like wacky burgers with 10,000 ingredients, they're basically the pastry stouts of burgers. If you like that, you are going to love Cheffery Eats, right? And he makes good chicken wings and things like that. So there's good food, and you can get a meal. But so many people still think of Barrel of Monks as not the place to go get dinner. They think of Barrel of Monks as a place to grab a beer at 7, and then by 9:30 on a Friday night, sometimes we're dead. We do all of our business between open and 9, 10 o'clock, and it's crickets at the time other bars and restaurants are jumping. So it's a very different, it's still that mentality from the sense of the consumer. They still, I don't think en masse, know what we're supposed to be. And they're still treating us in a tasting, quote unquote, tasting room way, which is very interesting.
Yeah. And I think a good bit of that does come down to location, location, location. Because it's hard for someone to call you their local if they're not, if they're not able to just walk there, or have a short bike ride or anything. I mean, other than that apartment complex, and there's some single family housing a little further down High Ridge Road from us, but I don't think we really see a lot of people who live over there. Almost everybody drives their car to our place. We had an event this past weekend. I mean, fucking cars every fucking where on our street. And it's like it's interesting to look at that and be like, yeah, we're doing well. We have business. But at the same time, I'm looking at it, I'm like, there are so many fucking cars here. I despise people having to drive for this, and thinking that some of these people probably shouldn't be driving after
Oh
this.
yeah.
But yeah, and that's another aspect of having a tap room that is surrounded by housing and in a local area. But to go back to that point of how can you truly be local? This is something that I go through my head all the time because yeah, the marketing people say it and breweries say it all the time. Like, I'm your local brewery. Are you? Like, just because your address says something doesn't make you necessarily local. And I know we had the episode about local, but being local is more than just your address. And being able to harness being a part of the community is the best that you can. I mean, I think there are people who do try very hard with being in maybe a shitty location to be a part of their community by getting involved with local charities, local events with their cities or towns or whatnot. And I give those people credit because I think that is the important legwork to do to be local and be seen where others are just going to be like, "Yeah, no one's going to just walk here. But hey, we're local. Come on out, drive your car, park on the side of the road, blah, blah, blah." Uh, I get that tough position and being in with that.
Well, there's also the aspect of this is when you're looking to where to place your brewery and your tap room, are you going into a community that really wants to have a local brewery or cares about it? Boca Raton, we've been there now for 9 years. We thought that, if you look up at Tequesta Brewing Company, people identify with Tequesta Brewing Company.
Yes.
There are people, the people in that area, they identify with it. Civil society. People are civil society people. They go down to Abacoa. That is their brewery. They are ride or die for that brewery.
I mean, the West
What-
Palm location is located next to so many different neighborhoods that are walking distance. Like
Yeah.
I used to live in one of those neighborhoods and walked to there all the time.
Well, and what I'm getting at is just even getting off, and I think that's a good point, but even getting off the walking aspect of it, these are communities that have embraced craft beer and embraced a brewery. They will talk about it. They will talk about it with pride. We get some of that for sure. But after being where we are and the level of distribution we have and the exposure we've had with all the charities and everyone we worked with, I don't think Boca wants a craft. I don't think they really care. The city of Boca Raton, the people in Boca Raton, don't really embrace us as like, oh my God, this is the place you got to go in Boca, or this is our thing. And even back in the day when Funky Buddha was in Boca, no one ever cared. We were winning awards and having the highest rated porter in the world, and no one cared. We didn't have anyone coming into that tap room that was that excited that was local. We had beer nerds, but they just went to wherever they can get the beer they could trade for the most different beers. And I think that it's not just about where you are in the community, it's does the community want to embrace you? Are they
That is true,
interested
yeah.
in you and what you have to offer? And I think we miscalculated with Boca. We thought we're going to be Belgian, we're going to be high-end beer, it's going to be this, a wine bar feel, cocktail, wine, high-end. We're going to be the beer version of that, and Boca's just going to go, oh my God, this is the place in Boca to go. And that never happened. We never even got close to it. Now you might say, oh, well, maybe your beer kind of sucks. Listen, there's a lot of reasons. Maybe our marketing isn't that good. Maybe we suck. I don't know. But we have not seen that kind of embracement by the community. And I don't think it's a given that every town just can't wait to get their favorite craft brewery.
That's true. And Boca has two other breweries in it, and I don't think that the community has embraced either of them either. I think that there were a lot of places, people who opened breweries who just looked at a dead zone and thought of
Yep.
like that's what we got to do, where you kind of got to do canvassing and looking at communities and okay, there's a opening here. Is there a reason for that? Like, do people actually want something like this, or is it not really in the cards, and that's why there isn't anyone there. Um, like going back to talking about if I were to do it, like I've had like a couple areas in mind that I would think would work, but I would go around, like go to businesses around those areas and talk with them, see how their businesses are doing. Um, get the vibe from like, hey, do you think people talked about anything like this being here? Like, what do you think? Do you like and just totally get the vibe from the people in the community, the businesses in that community, and see if it's worth your time in going further in that before you sign a fucking lease, before you even really look at real estate. But I mean, that's a hindsight on the Supreme there, more Supreme. Uh,
Well, it's hindsight for all of us, and we've learned these things now, right? And like I said, we still look at spots, and we still get. There was a spot that another brewery went in a year or so ago that was offered to us, and we looked at it and said, "Well, this is walkable. This has neighborhoods all over it. It's in a major shopping center. It's visible. There's other things to walk to, but there was a lot of other things we didn't like about it. There was a lot of things about the neighborhood that were like, is this a craft beer neighborhood? Is this the kind of thing that's going to support? In fact, it reminded me a lot, not in size, but it reminded me a lot of like 26 Degrees, which has a great visible location. And listen, I'm not gonna speculate on anyone else's business. They might be the most successful brewery in the history of mankind, but that's another brewery that I don't feel has like captured the imagination of Pompano Beach. And there's like what, 4 other breweries in Pompano, and none of them really seem to be, beating people away with the stick. And I think you can really risk going into a neighborhood thinking I've got all these things lined up, but it's all null if they're not going to embrace you. Um, Moving off that topic, because I think we beat that to death. I told you to put a pin in and talk about specialty beers. So this is another way that I am just fascinated by how our mentality has changed at Barrel of Monks, and I believe this is industry wide, at least to some degree, which is for years we thought we had to release and I think Tim might have mentioned this in some way, shape, or form on the podcast we just had with him, but in some way, shape, or form, we believe that we had to put out a new beer every week to get people excited. And this came from all the other breweries that were doing similar things, and your Wednesday specialty beer release, and then your package release, and your specialty bottle run release that would get people lining up outside the door. And that was such a part of craft beer, at least in South Florida. It was the special release, it was the rare release, it was the thing you can get your hands on and trade for something else. Really, really marketing to this one niche customer, this niche group of people. And we did that. We were on it was a rat race, just running around in circles trying to put all these new beers out. And over the last 5 years, we have limited every year for the last 5 years, we have cut specialty releases by some number. And every year our numbers go up. Not astronomically, but we're cutting the amount of beers we're serving. We're cutting the amount of specialty releases. We're cutting the amount of can or package releases, and we're selling more beer. And I'm not sure if that was always the case and we were just fooling ourselves and trying to super serve a clientele that really didn't make or break us like we thought they would, or if the beer buying public has grown up a little bit and realized like, who else in what other business expects you to put out a new product, a good one, 52 times a year? Got any thoughts on that, Mike?
yes, I man, flashbacks to doing man. Copper Point used to do one-off Wednesdays. When I was at Moss Mill, we had Fresh Beer Fridays. Like so much of that, like coming up with a new beer every week for the taps. Like I'm smiling, but man, there were some weeks that I'm like, I don't want to fucking do this anymore.
And how
But
many
yeah,
mediocre beers did you put out at that time?
probably half
And that's another
at
thing.
least.
you're just shooting yourself in the foot because you're putting out mediocre treatments that really aren't that good just to do something new. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I had to
No,
mention
no,
that.
no. See, like I I can go back and forth on this a little bit. The intensity of once a week type of thing is silly and it's stupid and it's unnecessary. But I do still believe that specialty stuff needs to be done in order to. I don't think that it brings new people in that often, but it might bring a regular back maybe an extra day a week. Like a person who comes 3 days a week regularly, you put out a new release once a month. Hey, that might bring them out for one extra day, and if that one extra day brings out another 100 of the regulars through that month, like that's some extra money. They have the beer on tap. They buy a pack of cans if it's available or a crowler, whatnot. I think that there is still a market for having like semi-regular new releases monthly, something like that. I think could work. I think it really just depends on your tap room, and if you deal with it long enough, you can find that sweet spot. Like I think a lot of the hype boy breweries have found that dropping 3 new cans every week, people don't line up for that shit anymore. Like they could still say all they want, like pre-order this on Osner, it's gonna be fucking there. Um, it's overkill to do that, but I still think you need to keep things fresh for a good bit of people. The ones who come in and have only the same thing all the time, you're probably not going to change those. But there are people who are regulars who might go back and forth on 2 to 3 core beers when they're in there. Like today I'm feeling like having Wizard, and they might have a pint of that, and then go, you know what? I'm gonna switch it up a bit. I'm gonna go with go with Single and Havana next, and they might have 3 of those in their rotation, but then they see, oh, there's a new IPA coming out. You know what? I'm gonna go in on Thursday and pick that up and try that. And I think they aren't that beer nerd. They aren't the super dedicated. I am a Wizard drinker, but those people need to be catered to a little bit too. And I think that that's important.
There's no doubt, and if I did come off as saying that is not necessary, that's
I
not
don't
what I
think
was
no,
trying to
I
say.
don't think that you were saying
Okay.
that. You were bashing the ultra, like the how many times you're doing that, like
And
the frequency. That was the
and I
word I was
and I
looking
like
for.
that it automatically comes off as bashing. So that's that anything I'm saying, I'm hoping I'm bashing someone. I always pick somebody to go after, like a pit bull.
If we all know one thing about you, Kevin, is you are a very violent person, and bashing is just your MO.
Yeah, that's my MO. So yeah, new beers are part of what makes craft beer, and we definitely still see. It's one of the great things about being around the industry as long as I have, and I don't have access to the data for the first 6 years of my career. I have my memories, which are probably all fucked at this point, and we know that every time we remember something, we change something in it. So you guys take all that stuff with a grain of salt. But I have experience in seeing what has worked and what it hasn't. And now, for the last 9 years, 10 years at Barrel of Monks, since I actually started brewing the beer before we opened, I have all this data, and I look at it, and I see these trends of a beer rise and fall, right? Oh, we're selling, 10 cases on the release day, and then it starts to become 8, and then it's 6, and then well, I can kind of get it. So now anytime, so I don't really need to get it when it comes out. And then all of a sudden I do a pre-sale for a beer that sells 1 4-pack for one of the best beers we make. And because they know they can get it, they have no need to do that thing because why am I going to go online and buy something that I can just buy when I go next time? And we're reevaluating everything about that model because that the idea of scarcity and the special nature of what you're putting out, it goes on the quality, the expectation of quality that your customers have, and it goes on the rarity, right? Am I going to be able to get this anytime I go in? Is this the only time they're going to release this? And do I expect this? Is it interesting? Do I expect it to be good? And both those things have to line up to get someone to get off their ass and come out that extra time a month that you're talking about. And there are still the people that are the uber beer nerds that are trying to find the it beer. And there's tons of breweries in South Florida. You may say that they're not selling out like they used to, and that might be true, but they're still probably moving product.
Yeah.
And there are more breweries spread out where people are going to and grabbing these things. But that crowd has not grown. That crowd has not tripled or quadrupled. It's still the same basic number of people that we all were catering to. I remember that everybody was talking about 10 years ago was, what's your Hunnapoo? You got to have your Hunnapoo. What's your Hunnapoo going to be? Because we need to have that beer that we can build a whole day about. And then and then we'll be famous and everyone will be millionaires and it'll be wonderful. And I remember the first time I got the thought at Barrel of Monks is like, oh, maybe we're not going to have a Hunnapoo. maybe out of the millions of breweries it feels like in this country, we're not going to be one of the 10 that has a beer that people travel to from fucking Europe. Maybe that's not going to be us. Just odds. Just the odds are not good, especially with the way the industry is and when we got into it and the way things are changing and the competition. And that was really freeing. It was one of my favorite stories from Penn Jillette was when he was talking with Ron Jeremy and he was joking around with him. He's like, oh, it's okay. It's not like you're ever going to be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And Ron Jeremy got really upset and said, well, you don't know that. You don't know that I won't be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And Penn said, Ron, I've seen you blow yourself on camera. You're never going to be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. There's a real freeing aspect when you realize you're never going to be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I realized it many, many years ago. Before I realized I was never going to have
I'm just realizing it right now.
Yeah, see, it's a watershed moment. I'm not going to be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I'm not going to have a Hunnapoo, right? I'm not going to be president. These are all things. These doors are closed for me, but that's okay. I can fill my niche and I can have my little brewery and I can do business and employ my people and make great beer, and we can grow our business in different ways. And we're talking about, like, I don't know, this isn't like an advice episode of if you're opening a brewery, do this, but that would be the thing I want to tell people. Have a thing you're trying to do that is realistic, that fits into the area you're trying to do it, fits into your budget, takes into account all the aspects of that, because that's what your brewery is going to be. It's going to be your tap room. It's going to be the people around you that you can bring in, and you're probably not going to get people coming in from Timbuktu to get your beer.
I thought for a second that you said this isn't a Vice episode of how to make a brewery. And I'm like, yeah, because we don't have Action Bronson. We're not getting fucking Stilly High or anything like that. But yeah, being able to admit what you are not ever going to be, I think is such an important thing in all aspects of life. Like, I know that we like to tell people, like, you could be anything that you want if you put your mind to it, and it's great for a confidence building type of thing for kids when they're younger. But we all know that you eventually get to the point where you tell them, like, well, you're not going to be that, like, you're not going to be this, like. Being realistic about things is super important, and I think a huge fucking problem with our society today is too many people think that they can be things that they aren't and can't be, and they're like, don't fucking tell me that. Like, it's just, yeah.
It's one of the greatest knowing where your blind spots are is everything. And now we're just talking about, life philosophy, but I love basketball growing up. I'm 5'9" and I'm slow. I can't jump very high, and I was never going to play college basketball. It doesn't matter how hard I worked. I wasn't going to do it. And somebody, oh, well, if you really, really got into it, bro. No, I did it. I spent 18 hours on days just shooting hoops and playing basketball and going to invitational camps and doing all this kind of stuff. I did not have the physical capabilities in my body to do the things that I would be necessary to play even low level college basketball. We Just because you're not able to be the biggest brewery in the world doesn't mean you can't open a brewery. Doesn't mean you can't have something that's special and unique to you. This is another thing that when I left Funky Buddha, I told the guys, I said, I think you guys are going to be Dogfish Head. And what I meant by saying that, I think you guys are going to be a national brand that I think you have the capacity and the ability to be that kind of a brand, a national brand that's in grocery stores in freaking Wyoming and is synonymous with craft beer. And they did a lot of that. They got all over the country. They succeeded wildly. But at the end of the day, they kind of didn't become Dogfish Head, at least not yet. There's still the possibility, right? But that's really, really difficult to do that. So much of it comes down to the time you got into the business, right? If Sam Calagione started a new brewery from the jump right now, probably doesn't get to where he wants where Dogfish Head was when he sold it, right? So that's just good advice across the board is to set realistic goals and expectations, know where your limitations are, and don't try to be something you're not.
Yeah, very, very true on that. How do we go back into talking about Taprooms?
Well, I think we were talking about tap rooms when we were talking about specialty beers and getting people excited about your stuff. So, I mean, I think
because you were like, "What's your Hunapoo?" And we got off on
and that's what it really comes down to is that if you don't have that beer that people are going to line up for outside your tap room, and so many people don't, you've got to find different ways to get people out there. And we're now in the situation where tap rooms are everything for us. We're not getting the same kind of response that we wanted, at least for our specialty beer releases and our specialty days and our anniversary parties and whatnot. So now we're just competing with bars, right?
Yeah.
Now we're just competing with the bar down the street that also has craft beer, and they've got craft beer from 7 different breweries. And maybe it's better, maybe it's worse, doesn't really matter, but they also have liquor. They're built to be a restaurant. They're built to be a bar. They're near other bars. And now we're going, hey, look at me over here. I'm the special guy. I actually make it here. And the normal person on the street goes, why the fuck do I care if they make it in the back? Does it taste better? No. So why am I going to come here instead of go there? It's a tough racket.
Yeah, because I think, oh man, I think it was our friend of the show, Jay, who I met for the first time in person this past week. Thank you for buying me beers, Jay. He said to me on Threads that like places that he enjoys, like the ratio of like vibe to good quality product, and like a good vibe in a place is important to a lot of people, to just go and hang out and feel comfortable, feel welcomed. And like, yeah, you're trying to tell somebody like, hey, come drink that beer at my place. We make it, like, and they go, I don't dig that vibe there. Like, I like your beer, but I like hanging out at this place more because it's more my feel. And they got the food that I like. My friends go there, and things like that. And like tap rooms, I find so crazy in the fact of the vibes that they give off. Like, who are they trying to cater to? who enjoys them. Like I think that's a wild concept. And like, are we going for a sports bar vibe? Do we have like 17 TVs with different sports all on at all times, or is there no TVs? Chill music with like people just hanging out and talking and conversing, and that can be off-putting to the person who's like, I want to watch Finns. Like, what? A place to drink beer and I can't watch a football game? Yeah, there's places like that, and you gotta understand that you're not going to be able to catch all of those people into your vibe in your place.
This is everything you're saying are conversations we've had for 9 years. We had one television when we opened. Now we have like 6 because we did not want to have sports on. We wanted people to come just for the beer. We wanted people to be in a chill environment and just think about how great this incredible classic beer styles were. And that didn't work. People didn't embrace it. So we've had to change things over time. The novelty, this is another thing that's really important for people to remember. Your customers that come in and see you are a small subset of all the other humans in the world. So when you hear from a customer how great your double is and how important it is to your bottom line, take that with a grain of salt, because the only people that are telling you that are the people that care enough to tell you and that come to your tap room, right? It's the same thing with like the vibe of the place or the novelty of, you might hear a lot, this is so cool that you make the beer here. So you think that's important. That gets not important very quickly for people. The novelty of that wears off quickly. People will come to a place and go, isn't it amazing they make the beer here? I'm going to come here all the time. And then they haven't been back for 3 to 6 months because, okay, I went. It doesn't really matter that they make the beer here because my favorite beer I get at the bar down the street too. But because we hear these things over and over again, we're subject to think that they are representing the whole when they're not. And that's a lot to do with like the styles of beer that you serve. I have been told by people, and I mentioned double earlier, if we don't have double on draft, we're going to go out of business because it's part of who we are. We sell 1.5 half barrels of double a month. It's one of our lowest selling beers. When we introduced IPAs, which I was told by our regulars will ruin your business, I sell 7 half barrels of Waypoint IPA a month. I wonder what the good move was there. Should I have brought the IPA in or should I stayed all? I was hearing this from the same group of people with the same ideology, and it was no accident. They found me because they wanted to drink Belgian beer. But there's a whole other group over here that are ignoring me because I only make Belgian beer.
And they don't say anything either. Like,
you never talk to them. They're not interacting with you. If I could get a random sampling of normal humans that are not Barrel Amongst fans to wander into my place and tell me their thoughts, they would be saying things differently, like, what the hell is a Belgian double, right? So because we have a very specific, it's a self-selected sample in a lot of ways, the people that we're interacting with, and we get bogged down in the things that they're interested in. I'm not saying that your customers and your regulars are not important. Of course they are, but you have to look at reason and logic connected to those ideas. You have to say, oh, this seems like a really important beer, or this style is really important, or the way we operate our tap room is this way, and then look at the numbers around it to see if the evidence actually supports that. Because there's often a feeling like, oh, that beer is so important to what we do. That beer it's one of our best. I've heard this from my partners. This beer is one of our best sellers. And I look at the numbers and I'm like, no, it's the opposite. It's one of the worst, but it feels like it is because people talk about it. We can't go on feel. Feel means nothing. What does the actual evidence show us?
I could go on about this for another 2.5 hours, but I will not. So at the end of the day, I think what the evidence that we have found through our very scientific method is Taprooms very, very important in the year of our Lord 2024, where wasn't so much in 2010 of year of the previous Lord. There's been like 7 or 8 since then, and yeah, um, there's a lot of different stuff that like there's no final note on this. There's no crossing the T, dotting the I, because this is such a other than that they are important, very important to a brewery. What goes into making you a successful tap room depends on your location, depends on your business model. It depends on the beers that you make. It depends on so much other stuff that we, I guess, kind of touched on. If you think that we didn't, tell us how you think that Kevin was wrong on social media that he'll never see, and then I'll just inform him on air on the next episode.
You do not have to encourage people to tell me that I'm wrong. It happens enough.
But any other points of this that you want to talk about?
No, I would be interested if people, any other aspects of tap rooms. I actually had several of the notes that we didn't get to because it's a complex business, and it's really interesting talking about bringing in RTDs and bringing in wine and different options. Like, there's a lot that goes into it, and we could touch on that again in the future. I know we're probably going to go into last calls here in a second, but I did have to mention this because we were talking about the change of the industry and all this stuff. We're mentioning Florida legacy breweries. We going to say anything about Wayne Wambles?
That was at my last call.
Oh, okay. Well, then you can do that for your last call.
No, we can. I mean, we can talk about it then, because for those of you unaware, so first of all, I think this also happened since we last recorded, is that Canarchy became Monster Brewing Company by name. It's been owned by Monster for a couple years now, but they officially changed the name a couple weeks ago. And then, as of this recording, like the end of last week, Wayne Wambles, the longtime original head brewer of Cigar City, the man who created Jai Alai, the man who created Hanapu, was let go by the company after many, many years, 15, 16 years of working there. Wayne's one of the smartest people I have ever had the opportunity to talk to. The very first incarnation of United We Drink, we had Wayne on an episode of this. I mean, that dude can talk about beer, and I have witnessed it for hours, and sometimes I have no idea what he's talking about, but I know that he knows what he is talking about. I mean, he's going to find a place I'd like to think very easily. I mean, especially now that he lives in North Carolina, like in the Asheville area. There's no loss of amount of places that would be upgrading themselves by hiring someone like Wayne there. But I mean, that is such a weird, crazy thing for a Florida beer fan. Like, Cigar City being bought by Canarchy was a moment. That then transitioning to Monster was another moment. And now, like, seeing the guy who created that stuff go on, it's really weird and bittersweet to be knowing that guy is not a part of it anymore, not by his own choice either. So, I mean, I wish Wayne nothing but luck. I do think that he'll find a place very easily, but I mean, super, super talented person.
I want to share a couple things. One, maybe the proudest moment of my life up to that point, and I hadn't met my wife yet, so I hadn't done much of note in my life. But I was talking with Wayne about beer, and I was a brewer at the time, and I remember I was talking to him, and I think I said something, and he like looked like, "Huh, that was a good point." and then responded to me with words I'd never understood and still don't to this day. And I remember thinking, I made a good point about brewing to Wayne Wambles. I think I've made it. I think I've finally done something. And then he talked over my head for 2 hours, and I just looked like, oh, that's interesting, and tried to pretend like I understood the words he was saying. It was great. So that was wonderful. My other moment with Wayne was when we were just starting Funky Buddha. Myself and Ryan, I think Jim Bast was partner at the time, but I think he was on the same trip. We went to Cigar City, and he had talked to Joey. Ryan had talked to Joey, and this is before the beers were released. This was when the original batches were in tank. Actually, I might be going too far back. Needless to say, very early on in Cigar City, they didn't have a tap room yet. It was just a railing inside the warehouse with a freestanding bathroom, and there was only 4 tanks in the place. And Wayne had no idea we were coming. We just showed up in the brewery, and he just looked at us like we were crazy people, and basically like, get out of here. And we're like, well, Joey said, and blah blah blah. And he called Joey's late or something like that. So he just like hurriedly took us around and showed us stuff. Like we were really annoying the shit out of him, but he was being nice. And he was like, blah, 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 this. And he gave us one of the first batches of Hanapu, and he just poured it off the thing. This is the thing I'm working on. It's got cocoa and chili peppers and blah, blah, blah. It's good. And, and it ran over to, stop a boil over or something. And he did his best to be as nice to us as possible, even though he didn't know who the fuck we were, and poured us great beer. And we were like, this is amazing. And it was in the starting phases of Funky in my career. And, every time I think of Cigar City, I know how big they've become. I think of that moment of when they started and who started it. And yes, Joey, obviously the owner of the business, and all the people that have made that brewery what it was and have grown it to a point where they can employ Phil Palmisano and make him a great living so he can, take care of his family. That's wonderful. The origins were Wayne Wambles, in a little 15-barrel pub system making killer beer and changing brewing in Florida forever.
The dude was the tap handle for High Ally for a while. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if people remember that Joey was Maduro, yep, and Wayne was High Ally, like standing on the top of those tap handles. Yeah, and Phil can correct me because he does like to send me texts from time to time when he has information on what we talk about on the show. But like, High Ally is either the 1 or number 2, like, of the actual beers in that Canarchy portfolio. Like, it's the Beast thing is more than half of their production now, which I thought was incredible to think about. But for the actual beers, that High Ally's, I think it's number 1 or number 2, like more than Dale's. Phil, again, correct me if I'm wrong. But to think that there are people in so many states that are drinking High Ally, and that I remember just little 12-ounce bottles of High Ally that people picked up in Tampa just at the tap room that was like, hey, here's High Ally. Like, oh shit, man, you got some High Ally from there? Like, it's
the first White Oak.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. End of an era.
One quick funny story about Wayne is when we had him on the show many, many years ago, before we started the interview, he goes, you guys aren't going to ask like a bunch of like weird esoteric questions about things. And I was like, oh no. And Joel was like, no. And we went about the interview, and then afterwards Joel's like, what the fuck's an esoteric question? And but I just found that so funny that he just perplexed Joel before we even started, and then we went through the whole thing. But yeah, Wayne's a fucking trip, man. I've drank beers with him and hung out with him in multiple states, let alone in this crazy world of Florida. So yeah, whoever hires him, you're getting a fucking great one there.
Faux show.
Well, since that was my basic last call, we'll go into last calls and it'll just be Kevin. This is the point in the show where we give each other a specific amount of time to talk about whatever it is that we want. Beverage related, not beverage related. The only rules are that it's unopposed and unobjected. We broke those all for me, so we won't do it for Kevin. Go ahead.
Is this the first time that you've ever had a last call stolen and not done a proper one in the history of United We Drink?
What was that?
Is this the first time you've ever had like a last call stolen and never actually done a last call for one of the people on the podcast?
I don't know. I feel like it's probably happened before, but for argument's sake, yep, first time.
First. So, okay, I'm in a really good mood right now, and we've been talking about this stuff, and I'm gonna bring things down a bit. So, we have a family dog named Sadie. We got her at a rescue about a year and a half ago. Got her around the time that my son was able to like go and help us pick out a dog and be, integral in that process because, he just turned 6 actually last weekend. And we were like, okay, well, he's getting to an age a year and a half ago. It's time to get a dog. I love dogs. I hadn't had a dog for myself, like my dog. I've lived with people with dogs, but I hadn't had a dog for myself since I was in high school. So I was home. And we picked out Sadie, this beautiful brindle dog, mutt. I mean, mix. No one knew what she was. A lot of people said that she looked like she was a mix between a husky and a pit. And we took her to the vet. That's what people said. But other people said that she was a blue heeler and all these other things. We never knew. It didn't matter. And she was a part of our family. And last about 10 days ago, she died. She was hit by a car. She was being watched by some friends of ours while we were out of town for my son's 6th birthday. And man, does that fucking suck. Any of you pet lovers out there, it's a kick in the teeth to lose what I believe is a member of my family. And I love dogs, and I would love just to wrestle with her and just to sit on the couch with her and just watch TV and pet her. And she was the sweetest thing. I mean, just so loving and calm, but then she'd also get like rambunctious so I could wrestle around with her. I mean, I will say this. I could not have wanted a better temperament. I could not have wanted, it was my perfect dog. Perfect. And obviously my son loved her and my wife loved her. And it's one thing to lose a dog when they get old and you had to put them down. I expected that. I thought we were going to do that. I was, go through your stages of life, and one day it's just time, and you take them and you put them down, and it sucks, but you expect it. But something like this, it just rips your heart out. And the reason why I'm saying this is, one, in some way, I want to immortalize Sadie, my dog, my little girl. But another thing I want to say is that my son just turned 6 years old. And we found out that she got hit about midnight while he was sleeping. And the thing I was scared about the most was having to tell him, because how's he going to handle this, right? He's just a little kid. And of course, so the first thing we did when we woke up, it was a school day. We just had to tell him. We weren't going to sugarcoat it or say that she was still at our friend's house and then deal with it later on. My wife and I are like, we have to be honest and straightforward and help him process this. We have to be transparent with our son. Be honest always. And we did, and he was devastated. But something really special happened in the fact that he started to process it relatively quickly. He actually calmed us down and said, Mommy, Daddy, we just need to breathe. Everyone do 3 breaths. And over the last 10 days, he's had sadness, of course, but he's also had just moments of clarity and understanding. And the process is amazing to see him go through it. And I think the one thing I'm going to take out of this is the resiliency and the understanding of the impermanence of life that this terrible situation puts forward to my son. I think is going to make him a stronger person, a more thoughtful person as he gets older. And we all deal with these things differently. And if you're dealing with the loss of a person, it's a different conversation. But loss is loss. If you're in a position ever in this situation, I don't want to tell you what to do. You do whatever feels right. But if you want advice, no matter what it is, speak honestly, openly. We didn't tell Jad that Sadie was in puppy heaven. We didn't say she went to a farm upstate. We said she was gone and that we would love her forever and that we would miss her forever. But she was gone now, and we have each other to support each other. And he's responded so well. I think that's the right move. But I'm some moron that makes beer for a living. I don't even do that. I write emails for a living. Talented people make beer for a living. But from somebody who has gone through a lot of loss in his life and someone who is trying to raise a thoughtful son that can navigate the world in the best way possible and give him the tools that are necessary to go through grief, to go through pain, and get on the other side of it in the right way, I think it's the right way to go. So I love you, Sadie. And for any of you going through any kind of loss, I feel for you and I wish everybody the best.
Yeah. She's a great dog. Had the opportunity to be around her a number of times. We have on our fridge a picture that your wife took of our boy Jack with Sadie when we came over to your house one time. And we love that picture. Like, he just has this big grin on his face. He's on his knees on the ground, looking up at Sadie's, looking down at him. Our boys love dogs so much, and I know that they loved Sadie when they came over a couple times to your house. I'm so sorry for your family, and I think that it's so incredible how well your son is processing it. So, yeah.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Do you want to plug anything?
No.
All right, fair enough. If you guys want to follow the show, we're at United We Drink on the Twitter and at United We Drink Pod on Instagram, Threads. We're on all of those major podcast networks where you can find this show and subscribe to it and listen to it on the device of your choice every other Thursday, free of charge. If you would like to support the show, go to our website, unitedwedrink.com, and check out the Brands We Love page. We have some awesome stuff over there, like Trade Coffee, Made in Cookware, Liquid Death Water, stuff that we really believe in. And if you use those links and make purchases through them, we get a little kickback that goes towards paying for some of our hosting. That's why I haven't asked Kevin for any money for a couple months, because using the money that we've made off of stuff like that to pay for some hosting for a little bit. Also, we got t-shirts, buttons, stickers, and all of that fun stuff over at our web store, unitedwedrink.com/store. That again does the same thing. Other than that, we'll be back in a couple weeks with a brand new episode. Thank you everyone once again, and cheers.
Cheers.
Toby Keith died, so there's the terrorist won that one.